What's your hypothalamus got to do with it? What's it do? How valuable is it to you during menopause? We answer those questions in this episode. I'll share links in the show notes with you for the online measure of your lean body mass. And by the way, you'll hear us talk about underwater weighing. It has, by the way, for 30 years been labeled as the quote unquote gold standard of body composition measurement. However, I wouldn't suggest you run off and find a university exercise clinic that does it and think that's going to be just awesome. Very few adults can actually be comfortable enough expelling all of their air in their lungs while underwater to get an accurate reading. We're not talking you're underwater, upright. You're actually underwater, kind of bent over in a very uncomfortable position. And you can't breathe, my friends. So what we've found is that, say with university students, and I've tested hundreds and thousands, because as an undergrad and then as a grad student, it's what I did as an exercise clinic administrative assistant over and over again until my voice was hoarse, shouting at people to blow it out, blow it out, blow it out, get all the air out, because if you don't, you're measuring fatter. We want you to sink because all the air is out. You're no longer buoyant. But that's a very uncomfortable position, by the way. So your smart scale is probably best, but we will also put in a prediction, a place where you can go online for a calculator of your lean muscle mass or lean body mass. And for some of you who haven't yet to invest in the smart scale, I've been recommending that you have it home since the beginning of the pandemic, where we need it, friends. We need to monitor what's happening. What are the effects of your daily habits on a daily basis? You need that feedback. You don't need to go to the doctor once a year and find out it's not good news. You need to know immediately, this is the result I'm getting from the habits that I'm doing. And it's the best way to be in control. So you'll also hear us talk about my guest's 5 pillars that she uses that are very familiar to you, except for number 5. So stay tuned for that one. And you'll want to pay attention to the gold nugget she suggests for you that gets specific, which many of you love in terms of how much protein, how much fat, and how much carbohydrate. So saturated fat, is that on your mind? Are you thinking that shouldn't be a part? You'll be surprised. Stay tuned. My name is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, but most of all, we hope to inspire you about how you age. So as you change your expectations, you can change the habits that you have. You are the new role model. Our parents did not lift weights till they died. They didn't use cell phones till they died. And we are breaking ground here and making history. And we have the choice because we have the science that shows us we can change anything by changing our thoughts about it. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset, often about the former two, so that you can have the energy and vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. And in this episode, I talk with Deborah Marigopoulos. And I love saying that name. Don't you love how it rolls off my tongue? We're going to dive into this episode about the role your hypothalamus plays in menopause. And Deborah Marigopoulos is an intuitive, integrative family nurse practitioner who's spent over 30 years blending the science of medicine with the art of healing to help thousands of women from perimenopause through postmenopause navigate their change of life and thrive. Deborah's worked with the hormonally challenged, including women suffering from PCOS, infertility, adrenal and thyroid dysfunction, diabetes, insulin resistance, as well as autoimmune conditions. Specializing in neuroimmune endocrinology, Deborah focuses on optimizing the function of the hypothalamus, the maestro of the symphony of hormones. Deborah is a graduate of UCLA, the past president of the California Association of Nurse Practitioners, endocrine advisor for Genova Laboratories, founder of the charity Divine Daughters Unite, author of the best-selling books Hormone in Harmony, Menopause Action Plan, and creator of Genesis Gold, a nutritional supplement uniquely formulated to balance hormones and optimize hypothalamic function. Let's dive into this episode. Deborah, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And listeners, Deborah and Deborah, that's not hard at all. So in the transcript, we won't put Deborah said. We will just leave that out. Okay. So, and I do laugh at my own jokes. I'm sorry. I just let you know that in advance. I love to unpack before we dive into the nitty gritty of what we've hinted at for everybody in the intro and the title. Why this? I mean, why are you, number one, why are you doing what you're doing? And why hypothalamus? How did you stumble across this being so important? Well, you could be a lawyer or a plumber. Clearly you're not. What's up?
So I decided to get into hormones. I was kind of forced into it, actually because of the birth of my first child, who was born intersex in 1984. And at that time, they didn't even have that terminology. So basically, the child was an XY female, and we had to choose a team between male and female. And I wasn't given much choices. And I was the only graduate from college and the only medical professional in the family. And I was just barely out of nursing school when I delivered this child. So I had to make some big decisions about the future of this little baby with really no training at all. So I started diving in and researching hormones, receptor sites, metabolism of hormones, detoxification, and very soon I became an expert in this area because we went against the grain, against what the medical providers said to do, and stuck with the chromosomes instead of doing major surgeries on the child and basically taking away the genitalia that was presenting and making it female, like allowing the child to decide for itself later, which was not heard of in 1984. It's a thing now, but it's not heard of then. So it was breaking the norms. And so I had to learn all this on my own at the age of 23. And so I just dove into studies about hormones. And then, of course, the universe gives you what you want. I became a nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner. And I started working in women's health. And I started seeing hormonally challenged patients. And then I got kind of frustrated with the conventional medical system because I wasn't able to do everything I wanted to do, including more natural type therapies and a lot more lifestyle education. So I started my own practice in 1997 of integrative practice, which means I put together both conventional and non-conventional, or what's called alternative therapies. And I wanted to know everything possible about hormones, but not just hormones, the neuroimmune endocrine system. And that's the system of all the messengers in your body. So, of course, the universe complied and sent me the sickest train wreck patients I could possibly imagine who had multiple endocrinopathies, meaning like diabetes, hypothyroidism, adrenal fatigue, pituitary tumors. Many of them had cancer. They were depressed, anxious, on multiple amount of medications. They were overweight. They just had all kinds of issues, immune issues with autoimmunity, just all kinds of issues. So I started treating them more naturally than how they came to me, taking them off medications, getting them on natural therapies. But I was sending them home with way more than I could possibly take myself as a person, as a busy mom. So I thought, there's got to be, I'm not getting to the root issue here. I'm basically just trading conventional for natural therapies. So is there a root issue? And this was 98, 99. So there wasn't a lot of Google, good search engines. I happened to get a Scientific America magazine, which studied fat white mice. And in this fat white mice study, they looked at the fat obese mice, and they had all the symptoms my patients were having. And then they compared them to the healthy, normal weight mice, and then they sacrificed them. and looked at their brains and found their hypothalamus looked odd in the obese mice. And they found that there was a hormone the hypothalamus wasn't producing properly. And that was bingo for me. So I started investigating the hypothalamus. Not that I was not introduced to the hypothalamus previously in my training, in my medical training. But we kind of forget about it in medicine because we can't measure the hormones from it. So we just kind of ignore it and do all the lower endocrine glands and don't look at those hormones, but don't look at what's coming from the hypothalamus. So I started researching it and actually came up with a nutraceutical that actually helped to balance the hypothalamus. And then that was by 2000. And, 22 years later, I'm the hypothalamus expert. I know a lot about it and focus on that particular organ as the maestro of the entire system of neurotransmitters, immune factors, and all of your hormones.
Okay, so for all of my listeners, that is a lot, lady. What role? I mean, they're all like, what about me? Right? So what role does the hypothalamus play in menopause?
That's a great question. So almost all of the symptoms that we associate with menopause is because the hypothalamus is dysregulated. So I want you to think of the hypothalamus. So first of all, it's in your brain. It's sitting right above your brain stem. The pituitary gland hangs from it. It is not protected by the blood-brain barrier. So if I had to touch your head and show you where it was, it would be right between your eyebrows and just a few inches in. Okay, so it's centered in the brain. It's not very big, about the size of an almond. And it literally controls all of your endocrine glands, including your sex steroid, your ovaries, to produce estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. But it also controls your adrenal glands, your thyroid, your pituitary gland, your pineal gland, which produces melatonin, and something called your thymus, which actually controls your immune system, and it controls your glucose metabolism as well. That being said, I want you to also think of your hormones like they're in a pyramid. And so the base of the pyramid are your sex steroids. And then you've got your glucose metabolism, and you've got your adrenal hormones, and you've got your thymus and your thyroid, pituitary, and the pineal gland at the top. Your hypothalamus is actually in the middle of all that. Think of it like the operating systems to your computer, and all of these other hormones are the software. So without an operating system, it doesn't matter how much fancy software you have, it's just not going to function. The hypothalamus is your operating system. It allows all of those hormones to interface and react with one another. But because the sex steroids are at the base of your pyramid of health hormonally, when they become dysregulated, like your ovaries are done, you've been ovulating for 35 years and you're out of eggs, you're no longer producing enough estrogen, you've not been producing enough progesterone through perimenopause for 5 to 15 years, and you're just declining, your hypothalamus becomes dysregulated. And one of the first signs of dysregulation is you can't sleep, your brain is foggy, and you can't regulate your temperature, you get hot flashes. So that is the core issue. And then I'm going to tell you about all kinds of other crazy symptoms that you would not believe is related to menopause because your hypothalamus is dysregulated.
So is it an automatic piece of the puzzle that your hypothalamus does get deregulated? There are a lot of women who, obviously, a lot of women who do, but also there's a lot of women who don't necessarily have huge sleep issues or their brain isn't foggy. So what about them?
So that's a really good question, because I see the sickest of sick, right? So I'm seeing people that are really suffering, but there's lots of people who don't suffer through the change. And I think a lot of it has to do with what I'm going to lead you to at the very end of this is what I call the 5 pillars of hypothalamus health. They've been practicing those pillars their entire life. They've eaten well, they're active, they've gotten great sleep, they know how to manage their stress, they have a healthy mindset. They've been supporting their hypothalamus through their lifestyle for a long time. It's said that women who have a little bit extra body weight going into menopause, about 5% above what would be ideal, have enough estrogen storage to kind of carry them for a while. And your adrenal glands produce precursors to your sex steroids, and they make about 5 to 10% of your needs. So when your ovaries run out, your adrenals kind of take over. But in a lot of countries, especially our country in the United States, where we're really stressed, we tend to have adrenal stress way before coming into perimenopause. So we can't count on our adrenals to hold us. But if you look at countries that are much more relaxed, we went to Italy, which is my family's homeland, and noticed that the women there, whether they were, 50 starting menopause, 70, totally postmenopause, or in their 90s, they did not look that different, except they were getting shorter. Okay. They were aging much more gracefully. Well, the Italians, especially where we were visiting in southern Italy, their idea of how you handle life is a lot more relaxed. Okay. And so I think their adrenals aren't as stressed. They go through menopause the same time as we do. 51 and a half is the average age of menopause all around developed nations, but they're not as stressed coming into it. So they can hang on with their adrenals longer. Now, all women going through menopause, about 10 to 15 years later, will go through what's called a second menopause. And that's when your adrenals kind of poop out, usually by your mid 60s to early 70s.
I think you just depressed about half of my listeners. You're a buzzkill. Okay.
I don't mean to.
There's a part 2. There's a second act. Right.
Well, that's where patients will get so confused. They come to me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm experiencing it again. And my doctor told me, just get off this anti-anxiety or, take this sleep med. I mean, what is going on here? And it's because you're having a second decline from your adrenal glands aren't producing as much as they used to. And so your hypothalamus gets dysregulated again. But there is hope. There's things you can do about it. It's just that it's a lot of dysregulation that we just assume is part of aging. And honestly, if you support yourself as early as you can, I know we're talking about mostly women in their 50s, but the sooner you start supporting yourself with these 5 pillars, the easier it'll be to, get through the change and not just survive, but thrive.
Yeah, that's great. And our listeners, so we are a little bit more inclusive than that, about 45 to 70.
Okay.
And we have outliers. So I know you're out there and you're beyond 70, so stick around. We're still thinking about you, and you're in your early 40s but still experiencing all the signs and symptoms. I see you too. I know you're here. So we're addressing all of you, and those of us who are not in our early 40s are jealous of you because you have an opportunity that we can't go back and replay. But
you can actually make the changes. I mean, there's lots of studies that have shown that people in their middle age, no matter when they start making those changes, especially with exercise and diet and stress management, can actually gain longevity and decrease the risk of chronic illnesses.
We can do that in our 90s until we're dead. You're absolutely right. What I meant was, if we've already gone through menopause, we can't get to menopause already feeling better.
That is true. But postmenopause is when you're declining. And because you've been hormonally deficient for so long, you have more issues on board, and you can fix those issues with hypothalamic support.
Okay.
So which is what when you're just beginning and you're premenopausal going into perimenopause. It takes longer and takes a little more effort when you're already postmenopausal and you've been in decline for a long time.
Yes.
I mean, think about, we're in a drought here in California. The land needs water really, really bad. Okay. So when you've been without hormones for a long time, it's like being in a desert. So we're going to have to really, really, till that soil and give it enough water in order to make it lush again at the cellular level in order to correct what we're seeing in postmenopause as hormonal decline.
Yes, amen. The way we describe it to our community is, it's like prior to menopause, you were on this, 8-lane interstate. You could shift lanes all day, had lots of latitude, and now you're on this single lane road, maybe going over a covered bridge. You got to get it right and keep it between the navigational buoys. So, but good to know. Now that we know, we do have a second act. Mm-hmm. There is one reason I love that, because, there is a tendency for some of us to say, well, there's nothing more I can do about that. I'm already post-menopause, so, it doesn't matter to me anymore. And we need a hook. We need a reason to stay on the hook doing these activities, changing our lifestyle habits. And now we've got it. Thank you very much. You just did that for all of us.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
So now we're going to tap into, what does hypothalamus management look like and nurturing?
Well, I have 5 pillars that I preach to my patients that are in my books, my videos, et cetera, because I think it's a little easier to stick with and it covers it all. And the biggest thing is we'll start with diet, nutrition. So the earlier you start eating well, and we'll talk about what that looks like, the easier it is for your hypothalamus to have the nutrients it needs to do its best job, to optimize its function. What we've found in research is a plant-based diet, and particularly the Mediterranean diet, because it's not just plant-based. I'm not talking a vegan diet per se. You need saturated fats. You need monounsaturated fats in order to have healthy hormones. But you want to have a plant-based diet, meaning you're getting lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of whole grains, and you're getting enough protein for your lean body mass. Now, if you don't know what your lean body mass is, you can calculate it online, but you need a 0.5 gram per pound of lean body mass.
So let's clarify that. So they can't actually calculate lean body mass online. You actually need to measure that by a scale. They can calculate BMI.
No, you can. There's actually a Navy calculator that's online that actually does a pretty good job, and it's within a couple percentage points of body fat, and then gives you your lean body mass. That's probably the closest calculator that I've used. I don't use BMI. I use lean body mass. Of course, underwater weighing is your best body fat measurement, so you can actually calculate lean body mass. But the Navy calculator takes into account your height, your weight, your age, your gender, a neck measurement, a waist measurement, an abdomen measurement, a hip measurement, and gives you a gist of it. I find that it's not very accurate if you're really, really, really lean. When I was a triathlete in my 30s, the only thing that was accurate with my body weight, with my body fat and lean body mass was really underwater weighing. None of the rest of it worked. Even caliper testing wasn't always as precise. Because my body fat
clarify.
was so low.
Yeah, let's clarify for listeners, though. Underwater weighing, so I've done thousands of them as an administrator. Unless you are comfortable. So as a swimmer, as a triathlete, you're more comfortable than a lot of people. Most people will not get all the air out as many times as I can scream, blow it out, blow it out, blow it out, till I'm hoarse and blue in the face. It's very difficult, and you're going to measure incorrectly if you don't. Smart scales and in body, and some of the newer bod pods are actually probably a better substitute for the majority of the population at this point.
That sounds great. Wherever you can get as accurate as a lean body mass as possible is what you're looking for. Because I find that most people, but mainly women, do not eat enough protein to maintain their lean body mass.
Exactly. We are preaching the same sermon.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just need to find different tools.
The exercise we do here will not work without the protein and the building blocks. Yep.
Exactly. And then making sure that they're getting an adequate amount of fat, which I usually say about half the amount of grams of fat as they're getting protein is. So for instance, if I'm 100 pounds of lean body mass and I need 50 grams minimum of protein, I need at least 25 grams of fat. So that's just kind of a minimal, calculation. And every body is different. Some people need more to be healthy. We've cut a lot of saturated fat out of our diets over the years. I'll be 60. I'm 61 right now. And when I was growing up, fat was the devil.
Right.
So, I basically came into my reproductive years not eating nearly enough fat. So, I was hormonally challenged by that. I didn't have periods. My body fat, I was an athlete, but I also wasn't eating enough fat. So we don't eat enough fat, and especially saturated fats. And it's missing in our diets. And that really helps your cell membranes to actually be able to be thick enough. Think of them as kind of like a butter sandwich, glycoprotein, fat, lipids, and then another glycoprotein membrane. And in that lipid layer, through those glycoprotein membranes, are your receptor sites, which allow neurotransmitters, cytokines, and hormones into the cells to do their job. So the messengers can't get in if those membranes are unhealthy.
So of course, we're going to need to come back to carbs because
Yes,
everybody's hanging
yes.
on the edge of their seat. But I also want to unpack this and pause right here. So when you say saturated fats, a lot of people are saying, oh, no, no, no. My doctor's told me I need to reduce or eliminate saturated fats because my cholesterol level. To that, you say,
I tell my patients with high cholesterol, first of all, if your cholesterol is high, your total, and it's your LDL that's high, and particularly it's your large particle LDL that's high, you're hormonally challenged. You don't have a cholesterol issue. Okay. So small particle, so your cholesterol is not created equally. There are small particles and large particles. Large particles are the good buoyant stuff. LDL, particularly large particle, is what your organs make, your glands make, used to make steroid hormones. That includes estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, DHEA, cortisol, cortisone, and aldosterone. So you need those LDL particles to actually make those, but those are the large particles. Small particles is what plugs up your arteries. So the only way to change your LDL particle size is to limit the amount of carbohydrates you're eating, not saturated fats.
very good. Thank you so much for clearing that up. And that was a mic drop, everybody, right? If your LDL is high, and tell me if I'm incorrect, but particularly your large particles, you're hormonally challenged. You don't have a cholesterol issue.
Yes. So what I do is I do subparticle sizes on my patients to
Yep.
look to see what their particle sizes are. And if a lot of small particles, I don't care. And I've seen them coming from their cardiologist and they're on statins and their total cholesterol is lowered, but their ratios are no different. They still are making way too many small particles. And so they're still at a risk for arteriosclerosis. So I focus on getting their hormonal challenges balanced. And then we work with, there's a lot of nutraceuticals that will help that small particle issue, but most of it's diet and exercise.
Perfect. Okay. So let's talk carbs.
So the amount of carbs you need is determinant upon how active you are. Okay. If you're very sedentary and you have weight to lose, you need less carbs. And it's basically a math equation. If you're putting in more carbohydrates, which are your energy foods, then you're expending, you've got to store them somewhere. And how you store them is number one is glycogens, which are sugars, but you only have about 400 calories worth of that in your body. That's in your muscle and your liver. Then you will then take that extra sugar that you've broken down from your carbs, bring it to your liver. Your liver will then convert it into triglycerides. That word means 3 sugar molecules. Okay. It's a fat holding 3 sugar molecules, and it will deposit that extra energy into your fat cells, mainly your white fat cells, which are around your middle. Oh, that's what gets bigger when we're menopausal.
Oh, yes.
Yay. So I really determine carbohydrate needs by energy expenditure with my patients and give them a range. So not everybody gets the same amount of carbs. It's really according to how much energy they're expending and basically how much body fat they need to lose in order to be in a healthy range.
So good. So very helpful. Okay. So when you are with a patient and you've got somebody, you've said, okay, based on your lean body mass, here's your protein. Based on that, here's your fat grams. And based on activity, here's the carbs. How's compliance? I mean, how are they doing on that? Is it feeling restrictive? Is it feeling adequate? I mean, where does that usually fall for somebody?
Well, first of all, my patients come to me, like I said, they're train wrecks, and the majority of them have actually experimented with lots of different diets and nutritional plans before they come to see me. They've usually seen at least 7 other providers before they've come to see me. They've talked with dietitians, they've worked with fitness coaches, So they're pretty desperate. Often what I find is the compliance issue is not so much the limitation of these foods, but changing their diet. I have a lot of vegans that need to eat some animal flesh for their health. I've
Mm-hmm.
got a lot, so it's
Mm-hmm.
actually changing their mindset towards their foods. And then a lot of people who believe they have food allergies or food sensitivities, and I need to basically heal their gut up first, and then we can start getting healthier foods because all they're absorbing are carbs. They just aren't absorbing protein and fat because they don't make enough digestive enzymes. Their stomach acid is low, which is very common in menopause. And so they are dependent on carbohydrates for energy, and they're just not absorbing the protein and fat. So oftentimes I have to start with their gut to heal that, to get them to be compliant.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Okay. Great description. I really am stuck a little bit, and I want you to go back and emphasize this if you would, because we have a lot of vegans and vegetarians listening, and it is a challenge for them to get their protein in. Many are committed, have been for a long time, and maybe they've been doing it for such a long time. I just was on the phone with somebody yesterday, and I said, well, before I say my suggestions, how how willing are you to change
Mm-hmm.
your lifestyle and the way you eat? Because this may fall on deaf ears if you're not willing to change. You won't like potentially what I'm about to say, but it's a struggle for them. So I want you to kind of maybe look at that again and emphasize for me the benefit. And so, what some are willing to do, especially the vegans, are open to doing is taking essential amino acid supplements. What are your thoughts on that as a support?
I'm actually pro them
Hmm.
taking amino acids that they're missing in their diets. Definitely, they need B12 as well because they can't get enough from a vegan diet,
Hmm.
and making sure they're getting sources of saturated fats, which is really hard. That's the hard part for them is getting those saturated fats,
Hmm.
because you really should be having about 1/3 of your fat should be coming from saturated sources. But we can, there are ways to do it with supplementation. My vegans have to supplement a lot more than my patients who are willing to follow a Mediterranean diet, a classic traditional back in Italy and Greek Mediterranean diet. Not what we do here. It's not that pasta rich. Let's put it that way.
So, and somebody I just overheard a conversation was saying that they traveled to Italy, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean they were having like bottles of olive oil like
Oh
with
yeah.
their meals.
Yeah, we go through Costco size olive oil like every 3 weeks, like a huge thing of it. I mean, my husband's Greek, I'm Italian. We use olive oil on everything. I use it for cooking. The only time I don't use olive oil for cooking is if I'm using high heat, like a stir fry, and
Yeah.
then I'll use avocado oil because it's more stable.
Yeah.
But we put it on everything. And the studies have shown that olive oil preserves the nutrients in foods in roasting and sauteing better than any other fat for cooking.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's something to be said for thousands of years of these Mediterranean people having just, fairly pristine health in terms of heart disease, diabetes, avoiding obesity, and maintaining their hormonal competency longer in their midlives.
Very cool. Love it. Okay. Ah,
Should we
wow.
go on with more pillars?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so diet's number one.
Yep.
Number two is activity. So we want to call it exercise, but really, if you're a super active person, you got a huge garden, you got a bunch of livestock, you're just really active with your body, you probably don't need to add extra exercise into the picture. You're already doing weight resistance. You're running after those chickens. But how many of us are doing that? That's why we now have to exercise. In our modern world, we usually have somebody else growing our foods and doing all that heavy labor that we aren't doing the labor that we need to do to keep our bodies healthy. So I had horses, goats, chickens for a long time. My last horse just died about 9 years ago. And I got to tell you that my upper body strength isn't as good as it was when she was alive and I was hauling manure around. Okay. So, and I'm mesomorphic, so it doesn't take much to build, but I have to now consciously do, plank poses and tricep dips and all this other stuff in order to keep my upper body strength. So you need three pillars to the exercise. Okay. So think of it as a step stool. You need to do something aerobic at least a few times a week and at least 20 to 30 minutes. Okay. And aerobic means you get your heart rate up. So the easy way to check that, I mean, lots of people have Fitbits and things, but if you don't have that, I'm super competitive. And so when I start wearing monitors and things like that, I go into I can do, the superwoman mode. So I don't wear monitors. I go by whether or not I can keep up a running conversation or sing out loud. If I can't, I'm in that aerobic zone. Okay. And I incorporate HIIT, high intensity training, as part of trying to really rev up the metabolism. It's been shown in some studies that just 20-second speed intervals, three of them, 3 times a week in a high intensity training and that could be running or rowing or swimming or cycling or whatever gets that heart rate up. I use a little hill that I like power walk up. That actually can help to reduce insulin resistance, lower cholesterol levels, get blood sugar under control, lower weight. So it doesn't have to be that much, but you've got to fit it in. And then the other piece of it is weight resistance. You have to do some kind of weight. It doesn't necessarily need to be weight training. You don't need to pick up weights.
Yes, it does. You know where you are, right? Okay. Yes, ideally it is, and it's overload. Yes.
But I also recommend, especially for my elderly patients, to do calisthenic type training, whatever they can do, until they can build up some of their joint strength. And then flexibility, you've got to stretch. And as we get older, that's what we lose strength and we lose flexibility before we lose our aerobic capacity.
Right.
So we need to be stretching regularly and staying active. I mean, if you have a sedentary job and you're sitting on your butt 8 hours a day, 30 minutes of exercise every day isn't going to be enough.
That's exactly right. The math doesn't work when you're talking 30 minutes versus 23 and a half.
Yeah, you need to move. You need to get up and move. You need to, incorporate more activity. There's some studies that showed that 30 minutes of exercise on a daily basis versus 3 10-minute getting up and moving around during the day. The 10-minute walkers actually were able to maintain their exercise level way past the 30-minute group because they just weren't sticking with it. So just getting up and moving makes a difference. But being sedentary is the new smoking. It's as dangerous as smoking now.
Yeah.
So that's the second. The third is sleep. Now I know you're being challenged to sleep because your hypothalamus regulates your circadian rhythm. Okay. It produces a huge hormone called pro-opiomelanocortin that then gets broken down to melanocyte stimulating hormone. That hormone knows where the sun is. It's very reflective. It's not just your eyes, it's your skin that's also picking up messages of light. So if you are being exposed to digital devices or you don't keep your room completely dark, you will not go into a deep enough sleep to stimulate melatonin production. So no digital devices after dusk. Get that room completely dark. Lower the temperature to 60 to 70 degrees, which is the perfect temperature for adequate melatonin production. You might need white noise. Some people do in order to sleep a little bit deeply, and have some kind of bedtime routine beforehand to get yourself relaxed. But sleep hygiene is really a huge issue with the majority of my patients. I think they have more problems sticking with a sleep program than they do with an exercise and dietary program.
Yeah, truth. And for all of our listeners, those who are in our community are well aware that, the fitness won't work if you're not sleeping due to cortisol, testosterone, and growth hormone aren't in the places they need to be. So it's the missing link. Long sleepers versus short sleepers have a much easier time of losing weight. More of that weight that they lose is fat weight versus fat-free weight, which is, of course, the desire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't when you're menopausal or even perimenopausal, you do not want to be losing lean body mass, which means your muscles and your bones. So exactly. I have a lot of women like my size. I'm petite. I don't weigh, a lot. I was trying to hold on to my body weight because I did not want to develop osteoporosis or lose lean body mass. And
Mm-hmm.
that meant I had to exercise and you need enough protein and get
Mm-hmm.
enough sleep. Now, I know it's hard when you're menopausal because your sleep is disrupted. Typically, menopausal women will wake up between 2 and 4, 1 and 3 in the morning. And that's when their melatonin kind of drops off. That's a clear sign your hypothalamus is dysregulated. If you're taking hormone replacement therapy, estrogen helps that at that particular moment. That's where it really makes a big difference. But there's other ways, if you don't want to use hormones, to actually get your hypothalamus in better balance so that you have a healthier circadian rhythm. And you're right. If you're producing high spiking cortisol at night, you're not making enough melatonin. You don't make enough melatonin. You don't turn down the effects of insulin. And you've got all that insulin inflammation and you cannot reverse insulin resistance. You've got to sleep and in the dark for enough hours, at least 7 to 9. So the fourth pillar is mindset. This, I think throws a lot of my patients off. They want to be healthy. They want to feel youthful. They want to age gracefully, but they don't really believe they can. They believe they're going to age and get the chronic illnesses that their mother and grandmothers and aunts did. They just think they're set up for that. And perhaps you do have the genetics for chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease, perhaps stroke, perhaps gaining that extra weight around your middle. It's part of your genetics. All these lifestyle things can fix it, okay? But your genetics are basically like playing cards. You were dealt a certain hand, but you have a whole little deck next to the cards you're looking at that you can borrow from. And your lifestyle choices changes the cards you are able to play. I have seen that in patients who have genetic discrepancies. They have SNPs that are not favoring their health. And with following these 5 pillars, including some hypothalamic nutraceutical support, we actually see those SNPs no longer expressing themselves and they're getting healthier.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
we don't have the ability to measure all your millions of SNPs to do a before and after. So we got to go by what we think you have and then go by how you're feeling and what you're doing at a biochemical level, which we can see on like blood tests, laboratory tests, to see if you're making a shift and a change.
So
But
good. Yeah.
it is definitely possible.
Yeah. Even 2 times a week strength training, which is what we recommend in the After 50 fitness formula for women, changes the expression of 179 genes within 6 months.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference when you make these lifestyle choices. You're committing to yourself. One of the mindset shifts that I work with my patients are, first of all, women in their 50s or anywhere from 40 to 70, they're busy. They may not be as busy as they were with little kids, but maybe now they're grandparents, they're volunteering, they're at the height of their career, they're trying to figure out what to do with their retired spouse. They've got a lot on their plates, okay, taking care of a lot of things, and they don't put themselves first. We don't do that as women generally. But it's like wearing an oxygen mask on the airplane. You've got to put yours on first before you help others. So if you're not taking care of yourself and having the mindset that I do need to do this for myself, I need to do stress reduction, I need to eat well, I need to exercise, I need to get my sleep for me, and then I can be there 100% for everyone else in my life. And that's a mindset that takes a while to shift because you're used to martyring yourself.
Yeah, so true. And I change one word there, though. I think that mindset actually needs to be I want to, not I need to.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
It's what you desire, and that becomes it starts with a need because you're being told you need to shift this, and then it becomes a desire, a want, and it's something that is who you are. So when I see patients that I haven't seen for like 10, 15, 20 years, and then they come back again to go through another hormonal challenge. Maybe I helped them with infertility in their 30s, and now we're going through menopause. And they're surprised that I haven't aged that much. Well, it's because I'm still practicing what I preach. And I totally believe that I can do anything I desire with this body if I take care of it.
Yeah. And that belief is huge.
It is huge. It is huge.
You are the placebo.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely huge. So, and then the fifth thing is nutraceutical support. And I actually developed a nutraceutical to support the hypothalamus. There's not much out there. There's some glandulars for hypothalamus support, which you can use for about 3 to 6 months, but not for long term. After 3 to 6 months, your body treats a glandular like a toxin. So whether you're using adrenal glandular or thyroid glandular or pituitary glandular, it goes to where it needs to go to feed that gland for about 3 to 6 months. And then after that, the liver says, why are you the only woman in the village eating all these pituitary glands? So we weren't meant to eat those animal glands for long periods of time. So I developed a vegan, so not animal-based nutraceuticals, so that my vegans would have some support too during this process. And not just during this process, but premenopausally, because that's when your hypothalamus starts to get dysregulated, and you just think you're moody, you can't concentrate, you're just not handling stress as well. I mean, some of the odd symptoms are the ones that really throw my patients off, not hot flashes, but chills, weird electrical sensations, panic attacks. All of a sudden you're allergic to things that you were never allergic to before, and you develop skin rashes and sensitivities. You're reacting to material, your clothing. That's all part of going through menopause. That's your hypothalamus being on high alert that it does not recognize you as a hormonally competent being. You're not who you were. And so the high alert is, we got to protect this organism, and everything seems like an assault to it. So living this, a more pristine, more hypothalamically supported lifestyle and supporting your hypothalamus actually really can help your body not have a lot of these, really crazy symptoms. I can't tell you how many patients come from, psychiatrists, neurologists, immunologists, and it's hypothalamic dysfunction.
Wow. Okay. And those of you who are out there, I know there are a lot of you who are fitness and health coaches who are also listening, either for yourself or you're listening for, how do I help my clients and what would be beneficial? So as you heard Deborah talk about the odd signs, like so very often if I'm presenting at a conference, we'll go over the most common symptoms and how you can help with exercise modifications to change the benefits and not be a part of the problem of making those worse. But we also, in the Flipping 50 Menopause Fitness Specialist course, go through 34 of those symptoms, and many of them are the lesser known ones that you just mentioned. So if some of those are news to you, and you are a coach, health coach, fitness trainer, and you want to go through it, I will put the link in the show notes to that as well. Deborah, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Where's the best place for listeners to find more about you?
The best place for them to find more about me is on my website, Genesis Gold. Okay. And then there's, about me, about my products, I have courses, I have, trainings, etc., to help you understand your body better and help you to heal up your hormones, no matter where you are in the change or even pre-change. And I don't just deal with women. I also have male patients. I'm a family nurse practitioner. So I take care of the whole family, and we all go through these hormonal shifts eventually. But I'm seeing hormonally challenged people in much younger years because of the stress and poor diets and crazy lifestyles people are living. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
So welcome.
Listeners, now it's up to you. So if there's a question that we inspired and you'd like to leave it, or your comment below the show notes, you'll find that. And if you're looking for, how do I connect with her again? We'll put all those links in the show notes, including her social media sites. And the show notes will be at flipping50.com/hypothalamus. What are you waiting for? Let's start Flipping 50 today.